Hello and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is a series of conversations between me, Mike Hutchinson, a games designer, and the other guy on this podcast, whose name is Glenn Ford, who's also a games designer. We are discussing today the topic of designing better miniature games. We both design miniature games, and when we design miniature games, we hope that other humans will encounter those games and play them and perhaps enjoy them. Unfortunately, I have discovered, Glenn, that not all humans like miniature games, and also not all humans like my miniature games, or indeed all of my miniature games. Um, we got a question recently. Do you want to straighten us out here on what we're talking about in terms of humans and which of them will play your game?
So the sort of the conversation that was brought up was Grimskull, who is a splendid designer, designed a splendid game called Torch and Shield that you should check out, and it's probably
He's been
still.
promoting his work rather too much on this channel recently. We better quickly change to promoting somebody else before we get accused of favoritism.
Well, it's what's in my head because it's what I've been painting minis for the last week. And he asked about sort of how you find the audience for your game, how you decide who your game is for, what sorts of people you should be sort of attracting to it, how you understand like who your player is and what attracts them and what pulls them in. And obviously that's a sort of a subject that I hope sticks in the mind of most sort of game designers, that whilst, as we sort of said in the previous conversation, you are designing for yourself and you're designing the game that you want to play, you are hopefully also designing a game that somebody else wants to play as well.
Well, and I think that's where we definitely start, and we say, well, I'm probably designing this game for me and all people who are like me. And then you can go and look at our video previously about the player persona types and realize that, damn it, I might not be representative of all player types, even who are a bit like me in terms of their interest. So there's already maybe if I just want people who are like me because I'm going to enjoy this game, there's already like a people who like the same kinds of hobby and game area as me, but then also people who play games in the same way and extract the same value from narrative versus competitive versus whatever.
Yeah, I think for me this question is it's as much about clearly defining your game, like setting out your stall, like as clearly and sharply as you possibly can. Um, and then usually by and large, unless you're incredibly lucky, you've gone really wide of the mark, the people will come. There are audiences for an experience worth designing. There is an audience, and it's like Gaslands. I think one of the huge reasons that Gaslands is successful is that it sets out what it is, and then it absolutely is that. It is 100% that, and I think that most people who come attracted by the label that's on the tin get what they were coming for. And that's not necessarily true for every game. Um, I
and
think.
and and you're sort of saying like there's a few ways that you can make that not true.
Hmm.
There's a like you're sort of saying there's a harmony there between what the game is and what people think the game will be, and you can definitely create disharmony. You can create with your artwork or your subject matter. You can sort of say, well, look, it's going to be this kind of game, and then actually mechanically it ends up being a different kind of game.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah, I think to a degree, I think it's like for whatever reason, a couple of people have popped up on the Discord, sort of designing mech games, and
mm,
somebody said, "Well, what does a mech game have to have?" And there's an argument for saying, "Well, nothing. You could just do a skirmish game. Only they're great big stompy robots, and the scale is just sort of all different. And why won't that work? That's just fine." There's the
right.
other hand of saying, "No, no. If someone's coming to a mech game, they're going to expect to find this, and that, and they're going to want this, and that. And and even if you don't give them those things, addressing the reason why they were looking for those things from a mech game and giving them the thing they were looking for when they wanted that particular thing is important. It's worthwhile, because you've pre-built an audience by making that offer, and then you've got to figure out what they're coming for when they come to that game. You know,
I'm wrestling at the moment with a really challenging version of this for a game I haven't been talking that much about, which is Pacific Command. So I have a game due to be released from Osprey in a while. It's it's still a while out, which is how come I'm not beating the drum on it. But because Pacific Command is a game of historically based combat, it's naval combat in World War II, and it's specifically about carrier combat and all of the interesting elements of what carrier combat looked like in World War II. That is a really intriguing problem for me because I have a very clear idea of the sort of game experience that I want to provide. Like, I am fascinated by like the stunning lack of things like advanced radar, like the complete like the fact that planes could see ships but completely misidentify them as either the enemy or not even know if they were like a flat top that carries aircraft or just something that only has guns. Like that to me is extremely fascinating, and is forcing me to make a game which is about the things that I find fascinating. But it is going to be a challenge because there will be a bunch of preconceptions brought in, and so I need to balance the way that I deliver the game and what the game is comprised of, such that like if you came to this with the kind of player that is coming to this that says like I am also fascinated in why carrier warfare in World War II was so interesting and so kind of exciting in its own way, and then deliver them something that amplifies that feeling and makes them even more excited and wants to replay the game because it's really kind of bringing that drama to life. But at the same time, like there's a bunch of, like you're saying with those mech games, there's a bunch of like preconceptions that people may come to that game with more than some of the other games that I've made, where people are like, well, it's got to have this and it's got to have that and it's got to have the other. For example, it's unlikely to have inertia-based movement, something that A Billion Suns also didn't have. And a lot of people think that a spaceship game, a game with boats in it, it's got to have inertial-based movement, because obviously. But the thing about carrier combat that I find interesting is that when you zoom out so that the map is 700 miles wide, it's incredibly interesting, tense cat and mouse kind of bluffing game. And it doesn't matter how fast the ships turn, like they're going to turn within like a microscopic dot on the tabletop. Inertia is removed from that through scale. But if you're making a mech game, like, must you have hit locations because BattleTech had them and then MechWarrior had heat? The video game had heat the same as the board game, and so you're like, well, there's a couple of things you've absolutely got to have.
I think
and if you don't do those things, are you pushing your game away from the one audience that was likely to have a look at it? Because that's what's happened with A Billion Suns. Like, Starship game fans look at it and go, brilliant, a new Starship game from Osprey. Well, this is weird and doesn't do the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is, at some point we need to have a conversation about how much innovation is too much innovation. And the truth of the matter is that something like A Billion Suns essentially is its own genre. It's absolutely not. It's an epic space opera, of a game. It's all of the Star Wars films, at once in a single play session, which obviously is a thing that exists because Star Wars films exist, but it's not. It's a deep space
wrapped in a tax return.
It is a deep space fleet battle game, but it is absolutely not what would be described by deep space fleet battle game to most players of deep space fleet battle games. I think there's sometimes,
Well, I
it's
mean, that's one of the things where, like, it's like it's a space battle game for people who don't even like space battle games. Kind of a moniker would come in. It's like, this is a this is a murder mystery for people who don't like murder mystery books. Like,
yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. And A Billion Suns is in many ways its own thing, and it marches to beat its own drum. And the people who love it absolutely love it. But I think that a lot of people who would love it have never found it because they aren't interested in spaceships in many ways. Um, and figuring out the new way of presenting these sorts of things to attract the attention of the people who are going to enjoy them. Yeah, it is a sort of it is
right, yeah. So
a puzzle.
there's a potential answer to the question, like, how do you decide on what players are for you? And the answer to that question is, well, it's actually potentially more important to figure out how you find the players that this is for,
Hmm.
because the players that this is for, they are an intersection of what your game has achieved through its design principles and its design. And it's almost like, I guess, historically, when I make things in my commercial realm, we spend a lot of time surveying the market, getting market research, figuring out what kind of potential customers might want from a solution to said thing. But when it comes to making pieces of art that people will consume in their leisure time, like, it's just a lot more complicated than that. Like, you can't just add a bunch of features together and say, well, this solves the problem of wanting a post-apocalyptic skirmish game perfectly. It just doesn't work like that.
Hmm.
And so I guess what I'm saying is that, like, if you make a truly strong, coherent, idiosyncratic, it's your own voice, it works brilliantly mechanically, but it also, like, it sums up to whatever it was that you were trying to say. Then the question is, like, some other people are going to bloody love that, and how do you find them? Because they might not find it. Rather
Yeah,
than saying, like, who am I building this for? I'm building it for these guys, and then those guys maybe find it or don't find it. Like, I don't know.
yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, it is difficult, and it's funny because like we were playing a game like a couple of weeks ago, and it felt like that there was a group of people that this game absolutely positively was for, and I absolutely positively wasn't one of those people. And it felt like the whole game was such a straitjacket of requirements for me to already know what I'm meant to be buying into before I even touch the game. And it felt like if I was exactly the right jigsaw piece, it would just click and it would be great and I would absolutely love it. And for every other person on the planet, it's just like what the hell? Um, you know, but that game is apparently is pretty popular and sort of well regarded. So I don't know. There are presumably people out there who for whom that is the right thing. There is a key to every lock, as people would say.
I mean, I guess the other thing that I think is, like, you can't go and talk to everyone that might play your game, and so, like, figuring out who you should write your game for, who your audience is, who your players are, like, almost like the best proxy for that, as well as, like, watching loads of YouTube battle reports of other people's indie games, which I genuinely super recommend. The other proxy for that is just reading loads of games and seeing how other people are tackling it, and seeing how, like, they are presenting things and how they are successfully or unsuccessfully kind of meeting their promises, or kind of delivering their promises. Because you can't know all of the players that might encounter, but you can be different to the competition, or be stand out from the competition, or be better than the competition. And that, in a swimming pool as small as ours, like, I think that's meaningful.
Yeah, yeah. And like it's for me, it's very much about sort of making a clear promise and then fulfilling it. If
Mm.
if you offer something, provided it's not too like insane and weird and outlandish, um, and then you deliver on it like in spades and with skill and elan and beauty, then you'll be fine. You will find the audience, because the people who are attracted by the thing you offer will then talk about this thing to other people and will
Yeah.
attract to it and pull them in. If you're offering something that there are no easy shortcuts to explain to people, you know, like I say, I think the difference between Gaslands and A Billion Suns is there's no shortcut to explain to people what A Billion Suns is. And I've tried a lot of times at conventions to sort of to get
Yeah,
across.
like if you give me someone for 5 minutes, I will sell them a copy of my game. If you give me them for like 12 seconds, they're just going to wander off confused.
Yeah,
Whereas with Gaslands, if you give me them for 12 seconds, they'll be like, oh, okay, yeah, cool.
yeah,
Toy cars with flamethrowers, I'm in.
Gaslands has an elevator pitch. A Billion Suns really doesn't, and anything you attempt to tell somebody in like a minute is only going to make matters worse. Um, and I think honestly, if there is sort of a design lesson here, is that, you know, if you are an independent designer and you are particularly driven by lots of people being attracted to your game, and that's not necessarily a requirement, but if that is a drive for you, um, consider what the elevator pitch for your game would be, and make it attractive and punchy, and make sure it's got hooks in there. And these aren't things you
Oh
need.
yeah, and the other thing is, and dump that whole dichotomy about like, oh, this is a narrative game or this is a competitive game. Go watch the episode about player personas. Like every interview I've listened to with people who are making like Asterix 28 type games, they start with that pitch was like, well, this isn't for competitive players. Well, it's like fine, but it could be.
Mm.
It could be like this is dump that dichotomy, because you know
Yeah, no.
both are fantastic. Both are fantastic, and can be delivered fantastically by the same game.
Well, look, the idea that there's no
I'm
narrative.
sorry, I accidentally opened a separate topic that we.
Yeah, the idea, and this is just a one thing. The idea that competitive things never have a narrative to them. It just well, what's the whole of sport then? Literally, the whole of sport is the idea that every competition therefore has a narrative. The idea that the two are like in opposite and opposing forces is just bewildering. And yeah, we'll have a whole conversation at some point on the narrative versus competitive dichotomy and the fact that it doesn't exist. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, communicate to people. For me, it's about communicating to people what they're going to get when they come in. Um, that is like 90% of your battle in finding your audience. It really is. You can do yourself so many favors by figuring out what your game is offering and finding a way of really quickly and efficiently communicating that. And you know,
and then absolutely, like you say, making sure it delivers on it.
yeah,
Like
absolutely.
like we played I can't even remember the name of it, it's so complicated. Aeronautica Imperialis recently.
Mm-hmm.
And like X-Wing says you will be an X-Wing or a TIE fighter pilot, and you will be going meow blat 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 blat. And you get templates and you zoom around and you roll dice and you go blat 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 blat. And I thought Aeronautica Imperialis was going to say like you were an orc in like a really cool red broken down Spitfire thing, and you're going to go daka 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 daka. And then we got the game out and we put it down, and it was like 5-dimensional chess. It was like, okay, this is like chess, but you get a special set of moves that are like 6 times more complicated than a knight moves, and it's different every turn depending on which way round you're facing and whether it's the morning or the afternoon or the evening. It's like, this is not like flying a plane as an orc at all.
Yes, no, yeah, absolutely, yes, yeah. Figure out, yeah, figure out what your game is. Find a way of communicating in a punchy way. And if you do want to do yourself favors in selling your game at a later point, think about picking a theme that will communicate that, or fulfilling the theme that you have really strongly and really punchily and really quickly, and try and make sure that you can communicate your game in like 2 sentences in a really sexy and attractive way. And
We should have a subsequent conversation about whether you should change the theme of your game partway through the design. once
That
you
I think
realise that you've made the wrong game, but it's a good game. It's just a different game.
I think there's a very good conversation to be had about those things. I'm going to go and write that fact down. For now,
Well, in which case, we whilst we're making notes for the next conversation, we should probably call it there.
yes. If you're designing a game, you're probably an audience for a game as well as looking for an audience of a game. What are you the audience for? What game would you like to see come about, and how would you describe it in 2 sentences? Put those 2 sentences into the comments section, and then we can make that game. While you're down there doing that, hit a like and subscribe button, and then swing by the Discord and type the 2 sentences in all caps, and then run away again, and then come back again, and we'll tell you whether they're good sentences, as if we have any idea one way or the other. But for now, and from this episode of Rule of Carnage, I think that's going to be a thank you and goodbye. So thank you and goodbye. Bye-bye.
Goodbye. See you next time. Bye bye.